Written in Bone Chapter 2. Who Were You? To hear Carter Hutchins talk about finding bones is to understand what makes moments like the unearthing of JR 1225B so extraordinary. As an archaeologist, I study the material remains of the past in order to understand the histories and cultures of the past, he observed. Most of the time, archaeology concerns the recovery and analysis of artifacts, but in the case of discovering a grave, I actually come face to face with the people I am studying. This to me is fascinating and moving. You actually are meeting the people of the past. They, of course, cannot talk, but they can inform us of the past through proper analysis. With the confirmation that the shaft did indeed contain human remains, the archaeologists turned to the careful and responsible excavation of their find. It was a task that would take Hudgens and team member Danny Smith several days and call on their specialized knowledge of human decomposition. As happens with any organism dies, the remains of a dead human being gradually decay. While a person is alive, muscles and bands of strong tissue called ligaments hold the bones in place. After death, microbes such as bacteria feed on these tissues along with the other parts of the body, causing them to decay. While this process may sound revolting to us, it's actually a fundamental step in the cycle of life. As microbes consume dead tissue to extract nutrients, the tissues are broken apart on a chemical level. They decompose into the elements they're composed of, such as carbon and nitrogen. These elements are recycled when they pass out of a microbe system and into the soil, where they provide nutrients for other animals and plants. The tissue dissolving action of microbes is one reason why bones are often the only remains found in graves. It also explains why those bones aren't found as close together or in as orderly a pattern as an untrained person might expect. Hudgens knew that the first step was to locate the boy's cranium, the part of the skull that encloses the brain. It's typically the highest point of the skeletal remains. Hudgens explained, because the rib cage collapses and other bones settle, as the soft tissues that surround them decompose. Typically, rib bones collapse into the chest area and settle near or on top of the vertebrae, the bones that make up a person's backbone. Because most bones settle in this manner, the skull is often a little bit closer to the surface than the rest of the skeleton. For this reason, we generally just uncover the cranium completely and then progress down the body. Hudgens explained. The sharp point and edge of a metal trowel can easily nick a bone or even flake pieces from its surface. Before continuing the excavation, Hudgens and Smith switched from metal trowels to wood and plastic tools, which are softer than metal and less likely to cause damage. With these tools, they uncovered the top portion of the entire skeleton. Hudgens and Smith weren't surprised to find that the teenager's skeleton was quite fragile, even for bones 4 centuries old. This fragility is characteristic of many Jamestown skeletons, thanks to the same beige-orange, clay-filled subsoil that created the tell post-hole soil stains, proving the team had found James Fort. Clay holds moisture longer than many other types of soil. Year after year, each time it rained on the boy's grave, water trickled down through the soil that filled the grave shaft. The rainwater drained away slowly from the dense, clay-filled subsoil. In the meantime, the boy's bones absorbed some of this moisture, causing them to expand slightly. After the water drained away, the bones dried, which made them contract. This alternating cycle of expansion and contraction caused tiny flecks of bone to break off. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a skeleton in perfect condition, Hudgens estimated the condition of the boy's skeleton at only a 3 or 4. Up on a pedestal. In theory, the team could have continued the excavation and started to remove the bones from the grave for further study. But once a skeleton has been moved, it is impossible to recreate the burial scene with complete accuracy, especially if the bones are in poor condition. A forensic anthropologist such as Doug Owsley can gather many significant pieces of evidence by examining the bones in situ. In situ is a Latin term meaning in the exact position and place where an object is first found. For this reason, the team's focus was not on removing the bones quickly, but rather on preparing them for evaluation by Owsley. As Hudgens explained, the next step was to pedestal the bones. In this process, we remove all the soil surrounding the bones except for that which is directly under them. The bones are left lying on a pad of soil. Pedestaling results in the highest possible visibility of the details of a skeleton as well as its position in the grave. As Hudgens pedestaled the bones, he noticed that the bones of the legs and feet were arranged in a straight line. That is, the legs were positioned close together at the knees, ankles, and feet, with the toes pointed straight up in the air. These were signs that the boy's body had been shrouded, or wrapped in a cloth, before it was buried. Because fabric decays more slowly than organic tissue, the shroud would have held the boy's bones closer together even after his muscles and ligaments had decomposed. If a shroud had not been present to hold the bones in place, several inches of space would have eventually separated the boy's left and right leg, and the feet would have splayed with the toes pointing outward. The practice of shooting was a customary manner of caring for the dead. 17th century Chesapeake colonists were not usually buried wearing their clothes. Instead, the person who had died was wrapped from head to toe in a shroud. The shroud was held in place with ropes tied above the head and below the feet or with pins. Archaeologists have noted a few exceptions to this custom. Some graves, including a few in the Starving Times Cemetery outside James Fort, included buttons and other evidence of clothing. William Kelso and Doug Owsley feel certain that these individuals were buried in fear and haste. For the settlers, the fear of catching a contagious disease by handling the clothes of an infected person would have far outweighed the benefits of touching the body to shoot it. The signs of shooting that Hudgens observed as he pedestaled JR 1225 Beese's bones indicated that his remains had been treated with care, according to custom. Yet, Hudgens saw other signs that seemed to indicate that the body may not have been shrouded. The boy's arms weren't at his side or in any other dignified position consistent with the 17th century shrouded English burial. His left arm lay across his body, his right arm was flung outward and upward towards his shoulder. Did this strange position indicate that no shroud had been used to hold his limbs in place? Hudgens and Kelso didn't think so. Often a shroud was wrapped loosely around the deceased person's chest before it was tied shut above the head. If the boy had been shrouded in that fashion, there would have been room for his arms to shift, perhaps as his body was lowered into the grave. Despite the arms being askewed, the close proximity of JR 1225B's legs and feet, along with the position of the toes, provided sufficient evidence to confirm the presence of a shroud. Hudgens made another, less common discovery as he continued to pedestal JR 1225B's bones. Alongside the left femur, the upper leg bone, lay a white triangular arrowhead, its point almost touching the bone. The arrowhead was the type of projectile point made and used by the Powhatan Indians, who lived in the area at that time. Its presence was a very clear indication that he was wounded, stated Hudgens. Had the wounded been a factor in the boy's death? Perhaps Doug Owsley should shed some light on that question. But before he tried to interpret the meaning of the arrowhead, he would have many other puzzles to consider. How old were you? A person's age at the time of death is one of the first things forensic anthropologists try to determine when they examine remains. When Owsley knelt on the soil next to JR 1225B's grave, he began his investigation by considering the length of the long bones of the skeleton's arms and legs. Long bones grow from a person's birth until the body becomes fully mature, around the time of young adulthood. For example, the femurs of the same person compared at ages 2 and 12 are likely to have almost doubled in length. In the case of JR 1225B, the length of the long bone quickly told Owsley that the skeleton was not that of a very young child. To obtain a person's precise age estimate, he had to look closer. Long bones have two main parts: the shaft, the long, straight part of the bone, and the epiphysis, the bony caps located at the end of long bones. Epiphysis remains separate from the shaft during an individual's growth year. In skeletal studies, they provided an important clue to the age at death. Until the age of about 14, a living person's epiphyses are joined to the shaft by cartilage, the same flexible connective tissue found in the tip of the nose. Over the course of teen years, the epiphyses and shafts of the various long bones start to fuse together, and the cartilage between them is gradually replaced by bone. At this stage, a visible line remains at the places where the epiphyses and the shafts connect. When a female reaches the age of 14 to 18, the epiphyses begin to fuse solidly to the shafts. The line where the bones have fused together disappears as the teen ages further. The epiphyses of a male's long bones fuse 2 to 3 years later than those of a female. This fact will come in play when Owsley later considered whether the bones were those of a male or a female. Inspections of the skeleton's long bones revealed that the epiphyses were still unfused, a definite sign the individual was a teenager at the time of death. Teeth also provide important clues about a person's age at death because they appear at fairly predictable times in all humans. A newborn infant usually has no visible teeth, but they are beginning to form in the jaw below the surface of the gum. By the age of 2, that child has about 20 visible teeth, often called baby teeth. Children lose their first baby teeth when they are 5 to 6 years old. At this age, they get their first set of molars, the large flat teeth at the back of the mouth. Human tooth development by age. Typical child, 2 years old. Typical adult, 25 years old. The second set of molars grows in at about 12 years of age. A person's third and last set of molars, often called wisdom teeth, grows in at about 18 years of age. The presence or absence of these various kinds of teeth help a forensic anthropologist estimate the person's age. JR 1225B's teeth supplied additional support for Owsley's theory about the boy's age at death. The second set of molars had grown in, and the cusps and the ridged points on a teeth surface showed signs of wear. During colonial times, the corn and wheat used in everyday meal preparation were not grounded as finely as they are in modern factories, so those people commonly ate larger pieces of grain than modern people do. Because this grittier grain was harder on the teeth, it noticeably wore them down. This type of wear is not seen on teeth in modern times. The wear on JR 1225B's molars indicated they had been used for a few years. The wisdom teeth, however, were still inside their jaw sockets, a sign that the teen was younger than 18 or 19 years old.